The clock showed 2:47 a.m. when Lisa walked down the empty hospital hallway for what felt like the 100th time that night. Her feet ached in her white sneakers, and dark circles had formed under her eyes. She had been working back-to-back shifts for 3 weeks straight now. The hospital was short-staffed again, and as the head nurse, she felt responsible for keeping everything running smoothly. Lisa loved her job. She really did. For 8 years, she had dedicated her life to caring for patients at City General Hospital. She started as a young, nervous junior nurse who could barely draw blood without her hands shaking. Now at 32, she was in charge of the entire pediatric wing. The kids called her Nurse Lisa and would light up whenever she walked into their rooms. Their parents trusted her completely, and her fellow nurses looked up to her as a leader. But tonight was different. Tonight she felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. She had already worked 16 hours straight, and her shift wasn't supposed to end for another 2 hours. The coffee machine in the break room had broken down yesterday, and she was running on pure determination and maybe half an energy bar she had found in her locker. The emergency call came at exactly 3:15 a.m. A car accident victim was being rushed into surgery, and they needed all hands on deck. Lisa quickly made sure her patients were comfortable and headed to the surgical wing. This was normal for her. Whenever there was a crisis, she was always ready to help wherever needed. Dr. Robert Carlson was already scrubbing in when she arrived. Everyone at the hospital knew Dr. Carlson. He was brilliant, no doubt about it. His hands could work magic during surgery, and he had saved countless lives over his 15-year career. But he had another reputation too, one that made nurses whisper nervously when his name came up in conversation. Dr. Carlson had a temper, not just a bad day kind of temper, but the kind that made grown adults feel like scared children. He would yell at nurses for the smallest mistakes. He once made a junior doctor cry in front of everyone because the young man had asked a question during surgery. People walked on eggshells around him, afraid to speak up even when they noticed something wrong. Lisa had dealt with Dr. Carlson many times before. She knew how to stay calm when he started shouting. She had learned to speak quietly and professionally, never giving him a reason to explode. But she also knew something that many other nurses had forgotten. Patient safety always came first, no matter who was in the room. The surgery began at 3:45 a.m. The patient was a 25-year-old construction worker who had been hit by a drunk driver. He had internal bleeding and time was running out. The surgical team worked in focused silence, with only the beeping of machines and Dr. Carlson's occasional instructions breaking the quiet. Lisa stood near the medication cart, carefully monitoring everything. She had done this hundreds of times before. Part of her job was to make sure the right medications were ready when the doctor needed them. She knew every drug, every dosage, every possible side effect. It was knowledge that had been drilled into her through years of training and experience. That's when she saw it. Dr. Carlson reached for a vial of medication, but in the dim lighting and his rush, he had grabbed the wrong one. The difference was subtle. The bottles looked almost identical. But Lisa knew that giving the wrong medication could kill the patient instantly. Her heart started racing, but her mind stayed clear. She had to act fast. "Doctor," she said quietly, stepping closer. "I think there might be a mix-up with the medication." Dr. Carlson didn't look up from the patient. "What are you talking about?" he snapped. "The vial in your hand. It's the wrong medication. You need the one with the blue label, not the green one." Lisa explained, keeping her voice steady and professional. The room went dead silent. Everyone stopped what they were doing. The other nurses exchanged worried glances. They all knew what was coming next. Dr. Carlson slowly turned his head to look at Lisa. His eyes were cold and angry. "Are you questioning my judgment?" he asked, in a low, dangerous voice. Lisa felt her stomach drop, but she stood her ground. A man's life was on the table, literally. She couldn't back down now, even if it meant facing Dr. Carlson's wrath. "I'm just following safety protocol, doctor. The patient's chart shows he's allergic to the medication in that vial. If we give it to him, he could go into shock," she said calmly. For a moment, Dr. Carlson just stared at her. The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The other surgical team members held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Then Dr. Carlson exploded. "How dare you?" he screamed, his face turning red with rage. "I've been doing surgery since before you even knew what a stethoscope was. You're just a nurse. Your job is to hand me what I ask for, not to think." Lisa felt like she had been slapped, but she didn't back down. "Doctor, I understand you're upset, but please check the patient's chart. I'm only trying to protect him." That's when Dr. Carlson lost all control. "Protect him? You're putting him in danger with your interference. You're incompetent. You're a disgrace to this hospital." The shouting continued for what felt like forever. Lisa stood there, taking every cruel word, every personal attack. Her hands were shaking now, but not from fear, from the effort of staying professional when all she wanted to do was defend herself. Other members of the surgical team watched in horror. Some of them wanted to speak up, to defend Lisa, but they were too afraid of Dr. Carlson's power in the hospital. He could end their careers with a single phone call to the administration. Finally, one of the younger doctors quietly picked up the patient's chart and handed it to Dr. Carlson. "Doctor, she's right. The patient is allergic to that medication." For a split second, everyone thought Dr. Carlson might apologize, might realize his mistake and move on with the surgery. But instead, his anger seemed to double. He was embarrassed at being corrected, and that made him even more furious. "This is your fault," he yelled at Lisa. "Your constant interruptions made me lose focus. Get out of my surgical suite." "Doctor, we need to continue with the surgery," Lisa said, trying to redirect his attention to the patient. But Dr. Carlson was beyond reason now. In front of the entire surgical team, in front of everyone who had always respected and feared him, he raised his hand and struck Lisa across the face. The sound echoed through the silent room like a gunshot. Everyone froze. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. A doctor had just hit a nurse during surgery. It was unthinkable, unforgivable, and completely inexcusable. Lisa touched her cheek, feeling the sting of the blow. Her eyes filled, with tears, but not from the physical pain. It was the humiliation, the shock, the complete betrayal of everything the medical profession was supposed to stand for. "You're fired," Dr. Carlson said coldly. "Security will escort you out of this hospital, and you'll never work in medicine again if I have anything to say about it." Lisa looked around the room at her colleagues, people she had worked with for years. Some of them couldn't even meet her eyes. Others looked at her with sympathy but said nothing. The silence was deafening. Without a word, Lisa removed her surgical gloves and walked out of the operating room. Behind her, she could hear Dr. Carlson barking orders, trying to pretend that nothing had happened. But something had happened. Something that would change everything. Lisa sat in her small Honda Civic in the hospital parking lot, her hands still trembling on the steering wheel. 20 minutes had passed since security escorted her out of the building, but she couldn't bring herself to start the car. The side of her face still stung where Dr. Carlson had struck her, and she kept replaying the moment over and over in her mind. 8 years. 8 years of her life dedicated to that hospital. She had missed family dinners, birthday parties, and holidays to take care of patients. She had held the hands of scared children getting their first shots. She had comforted grieving parents. She had saved lives, and now it was all gone because she tried to protect a patient from getting the wrong medication. The security guard who walked her out had been apologetic. "I'm sorry, Lisa," he had whispered as they passed through the lobby. "Everyone knows you're one of the good ones." But sorry didn't change anything. Sorry didn't give her job back or erase what had happened in that operating room. Finally, Lisa started her car and drove home to her tiny apartment across town. It was 4:30 in the morning, and the streets were empty except for a few delivery trucks making their early rounds. She lived alone in a one-bedroom place on the 3rd floor of an old building. It wasn't much, but it was home. The walls were covered with thank you cards from patients' families and photos from hospital charity events. Now, looking at them made her heart ache. She tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw Dr. Carlson's angry face. She heard his cruel words echoing in her head. "You're just a nurse." The way he said it made it sound like being a nurse was something shameful, something less than human. But Lisa had always been proud to be a nurse. It was more than a job to her. It was a calling. By 7 a.m., her phone started buzzing with text, messages. Word was already spreading through the hospital. The surgical team couldn't keep quiet about what they had witnessed, and news like this traveled fast in a place where everyone knew everyone else's business. "Lisa, are you okay? I can't believe what happened." That was from Jenny, a nurse from the emergency room. "Girl, everyone is talking about it. Dr. Carlson went too far this time." From Maria in pediatrics. "Is it true? Did he really hit you? I'm so sorry." From Tom, one of the young doctors. Each message was well-meaning, but they all felt like tiny knives in her heart. She didn't want to be the center of hospital gossip. She didn't want people to feel sorry for her. She just wanted her life back. Around 9 a.m., her phone rang. It was her mother. "Lisa, honey, I heard what happened. Mrs. Johnson's daughter works at the hospital, and she called me. Are you all right?" Lisa broke down crying for the first time since leaving the hospital. "Mom, I don't know what I'm going to do. He fired me. 8 years of my life and it's all gone. Come home, sweetheart. Come stay with your father and me for a while. We'll figure this out together." But Lisa couldn't go running home to her parents like a defeated child. She was 32 years old, not 12. She needed to face this on her own. Back at the hospital, the day shift was buzzing with tension. Dr. Carlson acted like nothing had happened, making his rounds and seeing patients as usual. But the nurses noticed he seemed more irritable than normal, snapping at anyone who came too close or asked too many questions. In the break room, small groups of staff huddled together, speaking in hushed tones. "I can't believe he actually hit her," whispered one of the newer nurses. "I mean, we all knew he had a temper, but this?" "Lisa was just doing her job," said another. "She probably saved that patient's life by catching his mistake. Someone needs to report this to administration," suggested a respiratory therapist. But others weren't so sure. "You know how this place works," said an older nurse who had been there for 15 years. "Dr. Carlson brings in millions of dollars for this hospital. They're not going to side with a nurse over him no matter what he did." The fear was real. Dr. Carlson had been at City General Hospital longer than most of the staff. He had connections with the board of directors. He played golf with the chief of staff. Nurses who had crossed him in the past had found themselves transferred to less desirable departments or let go for minor infractions. But something was different this time. What Dr. Carlson had done crossed a line that even his supporters couldn't ignore. Yelling at staff was one thing. Many doctors had bad tempers. But putting his hands on a nurse during surgery was something else entirely. Jenny from the emergency room decided to take action. She had worked with Lisa for 6 years and knew her to be one of the most dedicated and professional nurses in the hospital. During her lunch break, she went to the Human Resources Department. "I need to file a complaint," she told the HR representative, a middle-aged woman named Carol who had been with the hospital for over a decade. Carol listened to Jenny's account of what the surgical team had told her about the incident. Her expression grew more serious with each detail. "This is a very serious allegation," Carol said carefully. "Are you willing to put this in writing?" "Absolutely," Jenny replied. "And I'm not the only one. Half the nursing staff is ready to come forward about Dr. Carlson's behavior over the years." That afternoon, Carol began quietly reaching out to other staff members. What she discovered shocked her, even though she thought she knew everything that went on in her hospital. Story after story poured out. Nurses who had been humiliated in front of patients, residents who had been screamed at until they cried, staff members who had requested transfers just to get away from Dr. Carlson. "Why didn't anyone report this before?" Carol asked one of the older nurses. "Because we all have families to feed," the nurse replied sadly. "Because jobs like this don't grow on trees. Because we were scared." Meanwhile, Lisa spent the day in her apartment, trying to figure out what to do next. She had some savings, but not enough to last more than a couple of months without income. Her rent was due in 2 weeks. Her car payment was due in 10 days. The weight of her situation was starting to sink in. She thought about applying to other hospitals in the area. But she knew Dr. Carlson's influence extended beyond City General. He had friends and colleagues throughout the medical community. One bad word from him could destroy her chances of getting hired anywhere decent. As evening approached, Lisa made a decision. She wasn't going to run away or hide in shame. She wasn't going to let Dr. Carlson destroy her career and reputation without a fight. If he thought he could abuse his power and get away with it, he was wrong. She opened her laptop and began typing a formal complaint to the state nursing board and the hospital administration. She documented everything, not just what happened that night, but every incident she had witnessed or heard about over the years. It was time someone stood up to Dr. Carlson, and if no one else would do it, she would. The next morning would bring changes that no one at City General Hospital could have imagined. But that night, Lisa fell asleep with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt since walking out of that operating room. She was going to fight back, and she was going to win. What Dr. Carlson didn't know was that 6 months earlier, City General Hospital had installed brand new security cameras throughout the building. The administration had been worried about theft and wanted to protect expensive medical equipment. But they had also installed cameras in the operating rooms as part of a new quality control program. Margaret Wells, the hospital administrator, sat in her office that Wednesday morning going through her usual stack of paperwork when Carol from HR knocked on her door. Margaret had been working in hospital administration for 20 years, but she had started her career as a nurse. She understood what it was like to work long hours, deal with difficult doctors, and put patients first, no matter what. "We have a serious situation," Carol said, closing the door behind her. "It involves Dr. Carlson and one of our head nurses." Margaret listened carefully as Carol explained what had happened in the operating room 2 nights earlier. With each detail, Margaret's expression grew more serious. She had dealt with Dr. Carlson's complaints and outbursts before, but this was different. This was assault. "Are you absolutely sure about these details?" Margaret asked. "I have statements from 3 members of the surgical team who witnessed it," Carol replied. "And Lisa filed a formal complaint this morning. She's also contacted a lawyer." Margaret felt her stomach drop. A lawsuit would be bad enough, but if word got out to the media, it could destroy the hospital's reputation. City General had worked hard to build trust in the community. One incident like this could undo years of good work. "I need to see the security footage," Margaret said. "There's security footage?" Carol asked, surprised. "The new cameras we installed. If this happened in OR3, then we have it all on video." An hour later, Margaret sat in the security office with the head of hospital security, a former police officer named Dave. They pulled up the footage from that night, and what they saw made both of them sick to their stomachs. The camera had captured everything in perfect detail. They watched as Lisa calmly pointed out Dr. Carlson's medication error. They saw him explode in rage, screaming at her for trying to do her job. And then they watched in horror as he struck her across the face in front of the entire surgical team. "This is assault," Dave said quietly. "Plain and simple. I've seen a lot of things in my career, but a doctor hitting a nurse during surgery? That's a new one." Margaret rewound the footage and watched it again. There was no question about what had happened. Dr. Carlson had lost control and attacked a nurse who was trying to protect a patient. The evidence was crystal clear. "We need to involve the police," Dave said. "Not yet," Margaret replied. "Let me talk to the legal department first. This is going to get complicated very quickly." Meanwhile, Lisa was meeting with her lawyer, a woman named Patricia, who specialized in workplace violence cases. Patricia had handled similar situations before, but never in a hospital setting during surgery. "Do you have any witnesses?" Patricia asked as she reviewed Lisa's written statement. 3 people were in the room when it happened," Lisa said. "But I don't know if they'll be willing to testify. Everyone's afraid of Dr. Carlson." "Fear is understandable," Patricia said, "but what he did was a crime. No one has the right to put their hands on you at work, no matter who they are or how important they think they are." Patricia explained that they could file both civil and criminal complaints. The civil case would be against Dr. Carlson personally, and possibly the hospital if they failed to take appropriate action. The criminal case would be assault charges filed through the district attorney's office. "I need to warn you," Patricia said. "This won't be easy. Dr. Carlson probably has expensive lawyers and a lot of influence. The hospital might try to pressure you to drop the case. Are you prepared for that?" Lisa thought about all the nurses who had suffered in silence under Dr. Carlson's abuse over the years. She thought about the young nurses just starting their careers who didn't deserve to be treated like punching bags. She thought about the patients whose safety was at risk when medical staff were too scared to speak up. "I'm ready," she said firmly. Back at the hospital, word was spreading quickly through the staff. Dr. Carlson noticed that people were avoiding him more than usual. Conversation stopped when he walked into rooms. Nurses, who used to at least try to be polite now, barely acknowledged him. During his afternoon rounds, he overheard two nurses talking in hushed voices. "I heard she got a lawyer," one was saying. "Good for her," the other replied. "It's about time someone stood up to him." Dr. Carlson felt a chill run down his spine. A lawyer meant serious trouble. He had always assumed that his position at the hospital made him untouchable. He brought in millions of dollars in revenue. His surgical skills were legendary. Surely the administration wouldn't side with a nurse over him. But doubt was starting to creep in. He thought about the incident 2 nights ago and realized for the first time that other people had witnessed everything. In his rage, he hadn't considered the consequences of his actions. That evening, Margaret Wells called an emergency meeting with the hospital's board of directors. She presented them with the security footage and the witness statements. The room fell silent as they watched Dr. Carlson strike Lisa. "This is a disaster," said one board member. "We could lose our accreditation over this," said another. "What about our malpractice insurance? Will they even cover us if we kept him on staff after this?" Margaret had already spoken with the hospital's lawyers. The legal advice was clear. Dr. Carlson had to go. Keeping him on staff after a documented assault would expose the hospital to massive liability. "We don't have a choice," Margaret told the board. "If we don't take action, we're essentially endorsing his behavior. The legal and financial risks are too great." The board voted unanimously to suspend Dr. Carlson pending a full investigation. Meanwhile, Lisa was discovering that she wasn't as alone as she had thought. Her phone rang constantly with calls from colleagues offering support. Some were current employees, others were former staff members who had left because of Dr. Carlson's behavior. "I should have spoken up years ago," said one former nurse who had quit after Dr. Carlson humiliated her in front of a patient's family. "I'm sorry you had to go through this, but I'm glad someone finally had the courage to fight back. He threw surgical instruments at me once," said a surgical technician. "I was too scared to report it, but I'll testify for you if you need me to." Story after story poured out. Lisa realized that Dr. Carlson's abusive behavior had been an open secret for years. People had suffered in silence, assuming nothing could be done because of his status and influence. Jenny from the emergency room had been busy too. She had quietly spoken with dozens of staff members, documenting incidents and gathering evidence. What she found was a pattern of abuse that went back years. "He's been terrorizing people for so long that everyone just accepted it as normal," Jenny told Lisa over coffee. "But what he did to you was the last straw. People are finally ready to speak out." The investigation was expanding beyond just the incident with Lisa. Hospital administration was now looking into Dr. Carlson's entire history at City General. What they found painted a picture of a man who had abused his power for years, creating a toxic work environment that put both staff and patients at risk. As the week progressed, more evidence emerged. Personnel files showed a pattern of nurses requesting transfers away from departments where they would have to work with Dr. Carlson. Exit interviews revealed that several good employees had left the hospital specifically because of his behavior. Bay Legal Department was building a case not just about the assault, but about the hospital's failure to address a hostile work environment. They realized that their liability extended far beyond one incident. Dr. Carlson, unaware of the investigation closing in around him, continued his rounds and surgeries. But his world was about to come crashing down in a way he never could have imagined. Dr. Carlson woke up on Friday morning feeling confident. It had been 3 days since the incident with Lisa, and life at the hospital seemed to be returning to normal. He had performed 2 successful surgeries yesterday, and the board of directors hadn't contacted him about anything. In his mind, the whole situation was blowing over just like he expected it would. He showered, put on his expensive suit, and grabbed his leather briefcase. Dr. Carlson took pride in his appearance. He drove a BMW, lived in a mansion in the hills, and wore designer watches that cost more than most people made in a year. His success had made him feel untouchable, and he couldn't imagine that a simple nurse could threaten his position. The drive to the hospital was pleasant. The sun was shining, and he had his favorite classical music playing on the radio. He thought about his weekend plans, a golf game with some other doctors and dinner at the country club. Life was good, and he had no idea that it was about to come crashing down. When Dr. Carlson pulled into the hospital parking lot at 7:15 a.m., everything seemed normal. He parked in his reserved spot near the main entrance, the one with his name on it that made him feel important every time he saw it. He grabbed his briefcase and walked toward the building with the same confident stride he had used for 15 years. But something was wrong. His keycard didn't work. Dr. Carlson swiped his card again, thinking maybe the reader was having technical problems. Nothing happened. The red light stayed on and the door remained locked. He tried a 3rd time, then a 4th. Still nothing. "Excuse me, doctor," came a voice behind him. Dr. Carlson turned around to see 2 security guards approaching. One was Dave, the head of security whom he had known for years. The other was a younger guard he didn't recognize. "There seems to be a problem with my keycard," Dr. Carlson said, trying to sound annoyed rather than worried. "Dr. Carlson, I need you to come with us," Dave said quietly. His voice was serious and he wouldn't meet the doctor's eyes. "Come with you? What are you talking about?" "I have surgery scheduled in an hour." "Your surgeries have been canceled," Dave said. "Margaret Wells wants to see you in her office immediately." Dr. Carlson felt his stomach drop. Margaret Wells was the hospital administrator, and she only got involved in serious situations. "What's this about?" he asked, but he already had a sinking feeling that he knew. The walk through the hospital felt like the longest of Dr. Carlson's life. Staff members stopped talking when they saw him being escorted by security. Some watched with curiosity, others with what looked like satisfaction. The whispers followed him down every hallway. Margaret Wells was waiting in her office along with 2 people Dr. Carlson didn't recognize, a woman in a business suit and a man taking notes. The hospital's legal counsel was also there, looking grim. "Dr. Carlson, please sit down," Margaret said coldly. "What's going on here? Why was my keycard deactivated?" "I have patients waiting for me." Margaret opened a folder on her desk. "We need to discuss what happened on Tuesday night in operating room 3. Dr. Carlson's mouth went dry. He had hoped that the incident with Lisa would just fade away, but clearly that wasn't happening. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, trying to bluff his way through. "We have security footage," Margaret said simply. Those 4 words hit Dr. Carlson like a physical blow. Security footage. He had completely forgotten about the new cameras. In his anger that night, he hadn't even thought about the possibility that his actions were being recorded. "We also have statements from multiple witnesses," Margaret continued, "and we've been contacted by the police and the state medical board." The woman in the business suit introduced herself as a detective with the city police department. She was there to ask Dr. Carlson about the assault charges that had been filed against him. "Assault charges?" Dr. Carlson sputtered. "This is ridiculous. I barely touched her." "Doctor, I've seen the video," the detective said calmly. "You struck a nurse in the face during surgery. That's assault, regardless of your profession or position." Dr. Carlson felt the room spinning around him. This couldn't be happening. He was a respected surgeon, a pillar of the medical community. He saved lives. Surely they couldn't treat him like a common criminal over one small incident. "I want to call my lawyer," he said. "That's your right," the detective replied. "But first I need to inform you that you're being arrested for assault and battery." The next few minutes were a blur. Dr. Carlson was read his rights, handcuffed, and led out of the hospital in front of dozens of staff members. The same people who had once feared him now watched as he was escorted to a police car like any other criminal. News of Dr. Carlson's arrest spread through the hospital faster than wildfire. Nurses, doctors, and support staff gathered in small groups, talking in excited whispers. Some couldn't believe it was really happening. Others felt a sense of justice finally being served. In the pediatric wing, the nurses were celebrating quietly. "I can't believe Lisa actually did it," one of them said. "She took down the king of the hospital." "About time someone stood up to him," said another. "Do you know how many people he's hurt over the years?" But the biggest shock was yet to come. At 2 p.m., Margaret Wells called an emergency meeting for all hospital staff. The main auditorium was packed as people tried to figure out what was happening. Margaret walked to the podium and looked out at the crowd. She had been dreading this moment, but she knew it was necessary. "I'm sure you've all heard about the events of this morning," she began. "Dr. Carlson has been arrested and is no longer employed by this hospital." A murmur ran through the crowd. Even though people had been talking about it all day, hearing it officially was still shocking. "But that's not all," Margaret continued. "We've discovered that this incident was not isolated. Our investigation has revealed a pattern of abusive behavior that has gone on for years." She paused, letting that sink in. "As your administrator, I want to publicly apologize to every staff member who has suffered in silence. We failed you. We allowed a toxic work environment to continue because we were afraid of losing a high-profile surgeon. That was wrong, and it stops today." The auditorium was completely silent now. Margaret had everyone's attention. "Effective immediately, we are implementing a zero-tolerance policy for workplace harassment and abuse. No one, and I mean no one, is above the rules regardless of their position or how much money they bring to this hospital." She then did something that shocked everyone in the room. She called Lisa to the stage. Lisa had been sitting in the back, still not sure if she should even be there. She was technically still fired after all. But Margaret had specifically asked her to attend the meeting. "Lisa," Margaret said into the microphone, "on behalf of the entire hospital administration and board of directors, I want to offer you a public apology for what you endured. You were doing your job, protecting a patient, and you were assaulted for it. That should never have happened." The applause started slowly, then built to a roar. Lisa stood there, overwhelmed by the support from her colleagues. 3 days ago, she thought her career was over. Now she was being treated like a hero. "We would like to offer you your position back along with a promotion to Director of Nursing," Margaret continued. "We need leaders who will stand up for what's right even when it's difficult." Lisa felt tears streaming down her face. After everything she had been through, she was not only getting her job back but being promoted. The hospital was finally taking a stand against abuse and harassment. As the meeting ended and people began to leave, many stopped to talk to Lisa. Some apologized for not speaking up sooner. Others thanked her for her courage. Everyone seemed to understand that something important had changed at City General Hospital. The morning that had started with Dr. Carlson's confident arrival had ended with his arrest and the complete transformation of the hospital's culture. One nurse's courage to stand up for what was right had changed everything. The weeks following Dr. Carlson's arrest moved like a whirlwind for everyone involved. Lisa found herself at the center of a story that was spreading far beyond the walls of City General Hospital. Local news stations picked up the story, and soon it was making headlines across the state. "Prominent surgeon arrested for assaulting nurse during surgery," read the front page of the morning paper. The story included Dr. Carlson's mugshot alongside a photo of Lisa receiving a community service award from the previous year. The contrast was striking. On one side, a disgraced doctor who had lost everything, and on the other, a dedicated nurse who had risked her career to protect a patient. Dr. Carlson's expensive lawyer tried everything he could to minimize the damage. He argued that his client was under extreme stress during a life-saving surgery, and that the incident was blown out of proportion. But the security footage was impossible to argue against. The video clearly showed Dr. Carlson losing control and striking Lisa for simply doing her job. Within 48 hours of his arrest, The state medical board launched a formal investigation into Dr. Carlson's license. They interviewed dozens of current and former hospital employees, and what they discovered painted a disturbing picture of years of abuse and intimidation. "He once threw a scalpel at me because I handed him the wrong size," testified a former surgical technician. "It missed my head by inches. He would scream at nurses in front of patients," said another witness. Families would ask to be transferred to different doctors because they were uncomfortable with how he treated his staff. "I saw him make a young resident cry during surgery because the poor kid asked a question," reported a veteran nurse. "The kid quit medicine entirely after that." The medical board had heard enough. They suspended Dr. Carlson's license immediately, pending a full hearing. For a surgeon, losing your license is like losing your identity. Everything Dr. Carlson had worked for over 20 years was gone in an instant. The criminal case moved forward quickly. Dr. Carlson's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the district attorney wasn't interested in going easy on him. The case had attracted too much public attention, and there was too much evidence of a pattern of abusive behavior. "This isn't just about one incident," the prosecutor told the media. "This is about a powerful person who believed he was above the law and could treat people however he wanted." That stops here. Meanwhile, Lisa was adjusting to her new role as director of nursing. The promotion came with more responsibility and better pay, but more importantly, it gave her a platform to make real changes at the hospital. Her first priority was creating a safe environment where staff could report problems without fear of retaliation. "No one should have to choose between their job and their safety," Lisa told the nursing staff during her first department meeting. "We're going to build a culture where everyone feels valued and protected." The changes at City General Hospital were dramatic and immediate. Margaret Wells, the hospital administrator, implemented new policies that required anger management training for all doctors. They established an anonymous reporting system for workplace harassment. Most importantly, they made it clear that clinical expertise would never again be used as an excuse for abusive behavior. "We learned a hard lesson," Margaret told a reporter. "Having a brilliant surgeon doesn't mean anything if the staff is too afraid to help him provide safe patient care." The story began attracting national attention when healthcare worker advocacy groups picked it up. Lisa found herself invited to speak at nursing conferences and medical schools about the importance of speaking up for patient safety, even when it's scary. "I never wanted to be famous," Lisa told her mother during one of their weekly phone calls. "I just wanted to do my job and take care of patients." "But look at all the good that's come from your courage," her mother replied. "You've inspired people all over the country." It was true. Letters poured in from nurses, doctors, and other healthcare workers from across the nation. Many shared their own stories of workplace abuse and thanked Lisa for giving them hope that things could change. One letter particularly touched Lisa's heart. It was from a young nursing student who had been considering quitting her program after experiencing harassment during clinical rotations. "Your story showed me that I don't have to accept abuse as part of the job," the student wrote. "I'm staying in nursing school because I know there are people like you fighting to make healthcare a better place to work." 6 months after the incident, Dr. Carlson's criminal trial began. The courtroom was packed with hospital employees, many of whom had never thought they would see this day. Lisa testified first, describing the events of that night in clear, calm language. "I wasn't trying to embarrass Dr. Carlson or challenge his authority," she explained to the jury. "I was trying to prevent a patient from getting medication that could have killed him. That's what nurses are trained to do." The defense attorney tried to paint Lisa as an inexperienced nurse who had overstepped her bounds, but the prosecution had too much evidence. They played the security footage for the jury, and several members visibly gasped when they saw Dr. Carlson strike Lisa. Witness after witness took the stand to describe Dr. Carlson's pattern of abusive behavior. The picture that emerged was of a man who had used his position of power to terrorize anyone he saw as beneath him. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning a guilty verdict on charges of assault and battery. Dr. Carlson was sentenced to 6 months in jail, 2 years of probation, and 200 hours of community service. He was also ordered to pay Lisa's legal fees and attend anger management counseling. But the legal consequences were just the beginning of Dr. Carlson's fall from grace. Word of his conviction spread through the medical community like wildfire. Other hospitals that might have considered hiring him despite his reputation now wanted nothing to do with him. Medical conferences canceled his speaking engagements. Research collaborations ended. Dr. Carlson's personal life fell apart as well. His wife filed for divorce, citing the embarrassment and stress of the public scandal. His country club membership was revoked. Former friends and colleagues crossed the street to avoid talking to him. 6 months later, Dr. Carlson left the state entirely. Some said he moved to a small town somewhere in the Midwest and took a job doing something completely unrelated to medicine. Others heard he was trying to rebuild his medical career overseas, where American Medical Board sanctions might not follow him. Lisa, meanwhile, was thriving in her new role. Under her leadership, City General Hospital's nursing staff became one of the most respected in the region. Employee satisfaction scores reached all-time highs, and the hospital began attracting top talent from other facilities. The changes Lisa implemented went far beyond just her own hospital. Her story became a case study in healthcare administration programs across the country. Medical schools began teaching courses on professional behavior and workplace respect. Nursing schools used her story to empower students to speak up when they witnessed unsafe practices. 1 year after the incident, Lisa was invited to speak at the American Nurses Association annual conference. Standing before an audience of thousands of nurses, she reflected on how much had changed. "A year ago, I thought my career was over because I stood up for patient safety," she said. "Today, I'm here to tell you that doing the right thing is never wrong, even when it's scary, even when it costs you something." The audience gave her a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. In the crowd were nurses who had faced similar situations and found the courage to speak up because of Lisa's example. After her speech, a young nurse approached Lisa with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "Last month, I caught a doctor making a medication error. Instead of staying quiet like I might have before, I spoke up. The patient is fine, and the doctor actually thanked me for catching his mistake." Lisa smiled, knowing that this was what real change looked like. It wasn't just about punishing one abusive doctor. It was about creating a culture where patient safety always came first, where healthcare workers supported each other, and where doing the right thing was rewarded instead of punished. As she walked back to her hotel that night, Lisa thought about the scared, exhausted nurse she had been just over a year ago. That woman could never have imagined the journey that lay ahead. But she had taken the first step by refusing to stay silent, and that single moment of courage had changed everything. Not just for her, but for countless other healthcare workers who now knew they didn't have to suffer in silence. The ripple effects of one nurse's decision to stand up for what was right continued to spread, creating waves of positive change throughout the healthcare industry. Sometimes it really does take just one person to make a difference.